taken cocaine before? and then they came back and they said, well, and I asked them, I said, did it test positive? And they said yes. And then later on, after about 5 minutes, they said no. And I said, why did you say no? And they said, well, we had to check. And then they told me that they were testing me because I had a big, and they thought I was maybe a smuggling or something like that.
They did the same thing to me. They'll actually make up lies just to see how you react.
Yeah, to see how you react.
They said that they went on my phone. They said that they saw that I was trying to get a food license to stay here permanently in Australia. What about those messages? And I don't know what message you're talking about. I was like, yes, you do. And you really don't. Maybe if you can point them out to me on the phone, then I could explain them. It's like, yeah, we'll get to that.
They're like police.
Yeah.
They're trained.
Probably.
There you go. So I thought I'd read something from the Srimad Bhagavatam to start out. It's a verse from the sixth canto, the first chapter, 18th verse. Yeah. So the translation is, my dear king, as a pot containing liquor cannot be purified even if washed by the waters of many rivers, non-devotees cannot be purified by processes of atonement even if they perform them very well. I'll read that again. My dear king, as a pot containing liquor cannot be purified even if washed in the waters of many rivers, non-devotees cannot be purified by processes of atonement even if they perform them very well. And then the purport reads, to take advantage of the methods of atonement, one must be at least somewhat devoted, otherwise there is no chance of one's being purified. It is clear from this verse that even those who take advantage of karma kanda and jnana kanda, but are not at least slightly devoted, cannot be purified simply by following these other paths. The words prayaschita is plural in number to indicate the karma kanda and jnana kanda. Narottama Das Thakur therefore says karma kanda, jnana kanda, kevala vishara bandha. Thus Narottama Das Thakur compares the paths of karma kanda and jnana kanda to pots of poison. Liquor and poison are in the same category. According to this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, a person who has heard a good deal about the path of devotional service, but who is not attached to it, who is not Krishna conscious, is like a pot of liquor. Such a person cannot be purified without at least a slight touch of devotional service. So this concept of atonement is also prevalent in some faiths. Once I went, it was about 20 years ago, I went down to I lived in Los Angeles, and I went to a school. It was a Catholic school called Mother Mary of the Sea. And it was a little presentation that some devotees gave to a class down there. And about 30 people were in the class, students, about 16, 17, 18 years old. And many of the teachers came, about 4 or 5 of the nuns and 3 or 4 of the fathers attended. They wanted to see what this was all about. I think Catholic means something like ecumenical or broad-minded or something like that. So they were kind of interested to see what we had to say. And we gave about a 1-hour presentation. I'm sorry I have to look into the sunlight. And then one of the priests said, I want to talk to you a little privately, and can you come into my, there were about 3 or 4 of us. Can you come into my private quarters or chambers? And we went in there and talked a little bit. And he said that one of the things that bothers him is that he listens to confessions. They have a confession booth in this school, somewhere in the church part of it. And he says that very often the same people come to confess for the same sins week after week after week. And how do you deal with stuff like this? So we told him there's a thing called the mad elephant offense, and you shouldn't commit sins on the strength of chanting and that sort of thing. And he kind of liked that. He thought that was a pretty intelligent way to look at the process of atonement or confession. Because in Catholic tradition, I think there's a 3-part thing. It's not just confession. You're supposed to have, what's it called, atonement? Redemption is the last thing. Confession, contrition, confession, redemption. Contrition is like the feeling of guilt, and then confession, we all know, and then redemption means that I promise I'll never do it again, sort of thing. And then he gave us an envelope, a sealed envelope, which we didn't open. And on the drive back, it was about a half-hour drive to the Los Angeles temple. We opened the envelope, and there was $50 in it, and no note. He'd just given this $50 out of his own pocket because he really liked our, the Krishna conscious perspective on the concept of confession and atonement. Anyway, the point I'm making is that you know, atoning for something, or you know, there's another story that this is something that really happened about 500 years ago. Prabhupada tells there was a wealthy Hindu landholder named Buddhimanta Khan, and in those days, it so happened that if a Hindu was sprinkled by water from a water pot of a Muslim, he was considered a Muslim, and it was kind of like, you know, a weird thing. But you know, they used to, he said in this lecture that a lot of the Muslims in India weren't originally from the Muslim part of the world, the Middle East or Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or wherever they're from, but they were originally Hindus that either had some kind of a minor association, or just even by getting water from a water pot of a Muslim, they were turned into Muslim. Or the Hindu community thought they were Muslims, and one of the reasons that happened is these people who well, I'll talk about this in a little while, who gave atonement were making money, you know, by saying that you know, people could become Muslims just by getting some water sprinkled on them, and you have to atone for this. And I'll tell you what the process of atonement is, and you can become a Hindu again, but you have to pay me money to do it. And so all these sort of corrupt Hindu, they were called Bhattacharyas, were telling people that they could become Hindus again by giving them money and undergoing this proper atonement. So the story is that this Buddhimanta Khan was a very well-to-do Hindu landlord. If you can't hear, sit a little closer because I have a very soft voice. Anyways, so while he was a landholder, this one Muslim guy worked for him. He was a very much younger, and he did something wrong. I think he stole something or something, and so Buddhimanta Khan caned him. He punished him by caning him, by slapping him on the back with a piece of cane, sugar cane. You know, a very big piece of cane. And later on, this boy grew up, and he became the king. He became that's when the Pathans and the Mughals were ruling India, and he became Nawab Hussain Shah. And one day while he was getting massaged, his wife noticed that he had this scar, this mark on his back where he was caned, and she inquired, she said, "What is that mark? What's that from?" And he told her the whole story, that when he was a young boy, that he was working for this rich Hindu landlord, and that he did something wrong, and he got punished, and he got caned. And she said, "Oh, that could be very scandalous if people find out that you were caned by a Hindu. You must kill this man." He said, "I can't do that." And by this time, Buddhimanta Khan was an older man. He was in his 70s or 80s, and this Nawab Hussain Shah was a younger person. He was probably in his 30s, and he said, "I can't kill him. I mean, he was just like a father to me. I mean, I deserve to be punished. Can't kill him." And she said, "Well, then you can at least make him a Muslim." And so to pacify his wife, the queen, he said, "Okay, that's easy to do," because then in those days you could just sprinkle some water on a Hindu, and he became a Muslim. So he called Buddhimanta Khan to his presence, and he sprinkled some water from a water pot on him, and Buddhimanta Khan, it got around that this happened. You know, why did you go and see the king and this and that? And it got around that he'd gotten this water from a water pot of a Muslim, and that he was rejected by the Hindu community. So he went to these atonement people, these Bhattacharyas, to ask him how he could become a Hindu again, how he could stop being a Muslim, because they thought it was a very sinful thing for a Hindu to become a Muslim, even though very many Muslims became Hindus, but still they rejected him. So he went to this one Bhattacharya, and of course he was a pretty corrupt guy, and he said, the only atonement I know of is that you have to drink 1 kilogram of molten lead. And he said, "I can't do that, I'll die." And so he went to another Bhattacharya, and he asked him how he could atone for becoming a Muslim. And he said, "Well, you have to drink 1 kilo of molten ghee, that's melted butter. You have to drink it while it's in its liquid state, very, very hot." And he said, "I can't do that, I'll die." So he didn't know what to do. I mean, he was really bewildered by this time. And then he went to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who lived 500 years ago, and asked him what he should do. How could he atone for this? And he said, "The only thing you can do is you have to move to Vrindavan, give up your family life." He was 70 years old or 80 years old, and chant Hare Krishna, and then it'll uproot the desires. So the idea is that unless the desires to commit sinful activity are uprooted, I think there's a word, irracinated or deracinated or something like that. It means to pull it by the roots. Then you're going to commit those same things again. And when I was in university, I used to do this. We used to get drunk on Friday nights and get a terrible hangover the next morning, Saturday morning. It would be a headache and vomiting, but we do it every Friday night. We just do it again and again because the desire, the feeling of a good feeling of getting drunk on wine or liquor or whatever it was so good that we knew we were going to have to suffer the next day for it. But we did it anyway because the desire was still there. So there's another verse in this Bhagavatam that says that sometimes when there's a forest fire, a lot of the vegetation is burnt, and it's completely reduced to ashes, and it almost ceases to exist, and it looks like it's never going to come back. But as soon as there's an opportunity, like there's rain or something like that, because the roots haven't been burned, the grasses and the bushes and the trees come back up. So the desire to do things that are wrong in Vedic, like drinking liquor, in Vedic thought, are still there unless the desire is taken away. And the only form of atonement that can take those things away is to chant Hare Krishna, because when one chants Hare Krishna, the good qualities come about. All the good qualities. Just like many people are concerned about the environment, that we're destroying the environment, and that's true. I mean, the water is getting polluted, the air is getting polluted, and so many species are supposedly going extinct because we're eating them or we're poaching and whatnot, whales and so many, and it's a very unpleasant thing. But in the Krishna conscious philosophy, everything, a tree, a piece of grass, a whale, all the things that we're concerned about, even the atoms, they have souls. They're alive. So we naturally don't even like to kill a mosquito or a march fly or anything like that. It's unpleasant. We don't like to do it. I mean we do it unconsciously every time we walk. We step on ants. Every time we cook, we kill microbes. Every time we take water out of the tap, some microbes are being killed. So it's done accidentally, but we don't like to do it because we think that everything is alive. So in a sense, the question of doing good for the environment, doing good things for the plants, doing good things for the animals, doing good things for the air and water, it's a very natural thing for a devotee because we think everything is alive. And some people that are very concerned about the environment, they stop being concerned about the environment and they just don't even think about it anymore. Don't worry about it. They just feel it's not important. And that's because the root desires of wanting wanting good for all things and all plants and all people and peace and all that sort of thing is you can just shoo it away. Yeah.
I'm gonna try and grab it. Shake it
Yeah, some people do that. They grab them, they shake them, and they get rid of them. But unless the desire to stop doing those things is eradicated or is uprooted, then it's just going to continue. So this verse about washing pots that have been contained liquor doesn't purify them, because in Vedic thought, in Vedic philosophy, liquor is very toxic. And anything that has alcohol, especially liquor, is very poisonous. And it's kind of metaphoric. It says that you can wash these pots or these jars or whatever, things that contain liquor, for many times and by many rivers. And the Ganges is supposed to be a very purifying river. They found that Ganges water is scientifically pure, very pure. Purer than other waters. It doesn't become brackish. It was used in long ocean voyages by the British conquerors in the 19th century. Anyway, I'm getting a little off the subject now, but the idea is that you can't purify something that's impure just by washing it and atoning and doing things like that. You have to do something more serious. So you have to do something Krishna conscious to eradicate the desire to keep drinking or to keep getting purified. So this is a bit metaphorical. Anyway, those are just some thoughts that I had. Any comments anyone wants to make or questions? Yes.
Can you say more about how it's been scientifically proven that the Ganges actually purifies?
Well, it's two things. One is that in a scientific way, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what's in it. I think there's sulfa drugs or something like that's in Ganges water. And there was a guy named William Corliss. He's a writer, and he has his own blog, and he writes for Newsweek. He's a Newsweek magazine. He's a very well-known writer, but he found that Ganges water was used on ships. The British used to put it in big containers, big pots or barrels, and on long ocean voyages it would take maybe several months or a half a year or a year, and that this water, instead of becoming brackish or polluted by, which happens with most water, it would stay in its pristine form, and they could actually drink it for many months, and they used it for wounds and injuries. And somehow they didn't really know scientifically why the Ganges water was better and more pure, but it is, it is from a scientific point of view. I mean, I think someone said that it contains sulfa drugs, whatever that is, and that makes it more pure. And in India, people urinate and they defecate into the Ganges, and they say that if you go out into the middle, it's drinkable, but near the edge, it's near the banks, it gets polluted. I don't know too much about it, but it's been tested scientifically to have properties that ordinary other water doesn't have. There's a film I saw once that the BBC made about. It's called Ganges. It's real long. It's over 2 hours long. It's a documentary, and it's about the river Ganges, and it's a very interesting river, and it comes out of a place. It comes out of several places in the Himalayas. There's one place called Gomukh, which a lot of pilgrims go to because it's supposed to be a big source of water coming out of this glacier. And some scientists measured the amount of water. They figured out how many gallons or how many liters of water come out every second out of this glacier, and they figured that it was too much water than could possibly melt from the glacier. It was that was a scientific. They measured. They were somehow able to measure the amount of melt of ice in the glacier, and they said it was. And according to the Vedas, the source of the Ganges River is somewhere outside of the material universe. I looked up once on I think it was Folio or somewhere, and it was found that the Ganges isn't one of the longest rivers in the world. It was only like the 30th or 34th longest river, and the Nile and the Amazon they had more water and they were also longer. But the Ganges has unusual properties, and this documentary I saw talked about how it comes out of the glaciers, and then during after the meltdown in the summer season, when the glaciers are smaller, the water just trickles out from the glaciers. It doesn't come out with the same intensity out of the glacier, and then when the monsoons come in the coastal areas of India in the east, the Ganges flows from the Himalayan mountains out to the east into the delta, and in the delta it branches into many tributaries. I don't know if you've seen pictures of it, but there's a lot of overheads in this documentary. A lot of overhead helicopter, airplane, or satellite pictures of how it shows the Ganges breaking into many different rivulets as it goes into the Bay of Bengal, the eastern part of the Indian Ocean. And it's said that there's so much flow when the monsoon season comes, it increases the flow of the Ganges, and the very parched plains become very very wet. And the delta is called the Sundarban. That's the name of it, and that's where the Bengal tigers, the famous Bengal tigers, live. And there's a lot of vicious stuff going on between the tigers and the other animals. The tigers eat them sometimes, and there's a lot of plant life too that grows in this delta in the Sundarban, because the Sundarban becomes very muddy during the monsoon season. There's a lot of rain. It's not continuous rain, but it's very heavy rain, like it rains in tropical areas. It rains even here very heavily at certain times of the year. And in this documentary, it said that the mud sometimes goes down into it's muddy. The soil is muddy for up to 2 miles in depth, which is very hard to believe, that the mud can be 2 miles deep, but they say it goes up to 5 miles in some places. This is what the documentary said. Anyway, because it's so fertile, because of this mud, the soil is so fertile, all kinds of very unusual flora grows in there, and a lot of unusual what do they call it? Fauna and flora, well, usual beasts and animals, and that's where a lot of these monkeys come from there too. The Langor monkeys, they call them Hanuman monkeys. They have black faces. They're different breeds of monkeys, and then there's the other kind, the macaques or the rhesus monkeys, the brown ones, and there's a lot of them in there, and they thrive in that time of the year when the monsoon season comes in the Ganges. But also a lot of pilgrims go. It's in January. There's a thing called Makara Sankranti. Lord Kapila was supposed to have been born in that area, in the Ganges Delta, where it goes into the water. And so at a certain time of the year, I think it's in the first couple of weeks, according to the lunar calendar of January, there's a lot of pilgrims. Tens of thousands of pilgrims go to this area, even though it's very dangerous at night because there's so many tigers. But they go there. It's a very sacred place, considered very sacred. So any other? I mean, that's all. I don't know. There's other things, but I don't know a whole lot about the Ganges River. Yes.
I was thinking recently about that verse. I think it might be from the Bhagavatam. I was hoping you could confirm it for me, where it says that Vishnu is to be remembered and never to be forgotten, and that all the do's and the do-nots serve those two principles. All the do's are meant to serve the one do, remember Vishnu, and all the do-nots, all the restrictions are meant to serve the one restriction, never forget him. Is that from the Bhagavatam?
I think it is from the Bhagavatam, but it's written in a book called Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, or Nectar of Devotion by Rupa Goswami. And most of his verses are taken from the Bhagavatam. I don't know the exact verse, but it's in there. And it's in the Nectar of Devotion. It's actually written in the Nectar of Devotion. And I think it's taken from the Bhagavatam, but I don't know which verse.
Okay.
The idea is that there are many restrictions in Krishna consciousness, things that you can't do, you're not supposed to do, like you're not supposed to drink, you're not supposed to have any form of intoxication, you're not supposed to have illicit sex, you're not supposed to be gambling, you're not supposed to be eating meat, and there's many other things too.
Yeah.
But the idea is that if you can think of Krishna all the time, that's the do thing, not the do not thing. That's more important. That you may be taking intoxication, you may be drinking, you may be having illicit sex, you may be gambling, and you may be eating meat. But if you can remember Krishna, that's the most important thing. Then all these other things gradually will go away. Maybe it'll take a long time, maybe many lifetimes in some cases, but it will go away if the most important thing, the do thing, the remembering of Krishna all the time, is there. So in other words, if one is philosophically convinced about the Krishna consciousness philosophy, but is unable to follow all the restrictions, that's the most important thing. I think I heard that when Prabhupada was contemplating coming to the United States from India, or contemplating leaving India and going to the West, what part of the West it was, I don't know, that other people said, well, you can't go there because they have such bad habits. They're eating meat, they're having illicit sex, and so on and so on. And I said, I don't care what they do. He said, as long as they're, as long as they like the philosophy that I'm not this body and that there's a God and that sort of stuff, that's the main thing. And he said, even if they're eating meat and they're living in my what do they call those hostels, that'll be all right. I won't mind that because gradually they'll get purified. So in a sense, the Krishna consciousness movement is a form of purification. I mean, I don't know if they use that word properly, pure and purify, but the idea that the consciousness is impure, and Krishna consciousness is a process of purifying the consciousness. So some people will say, well, if the soul is pure by nature, how is it that it has to become purified? And so one example is that like gold, sometimes gold can be covered by something like mud, and we can't see that it's actually gold. But if we wash all the mud away, then the gold begins to glitter, and it's perceived as genuinely gold. So that's a very gross way of explaining what purification of the consciousness is. and how it needs to be purified. Because, I mean, in the West, it's to not have illicit sex, not have gambling, to not have intoxication, to not have meat. It's like taking everything away. People think, well, what is there then if you take all these things away? Then there's nothing else to live for. I might as well be dead. But in other parts of the world, these things are not considered so important. We can live without eating animals, and we can live without intoxication. We can live without these things. It's very normal. But in the West, especially, we're taught that this is life. And there's one guy who was a Lord somebody or other, I don't remember his name, in England, and he spoke to one of Prabhupada's godbrothers about. He said, "I want to become a Brahmin. What do I do?" And he said, "Oh, becoming a Brahmin is not so difficult. You just can't have illicit sex, you can't have gambling, you can't eat meat, you can't have intoxication." He said, "That's impossible." He said, "You're taking my life away. I can't become a Brahmin." So in one sense, it's like a process of recreation: singing, dancing, feasting. And those are part of the do things, and then part of the know things are very. It's very difficult also. It's very easy and also very difficult. So these are just some thoughts. We have about 10 more minutes if anyone wants to say anything.
What is the difference between the Hare Krishna movement and yoga? Because in the path of yoga there is bhakti yoga as well. So what does if somebody practices yoga and the different paths of yoga, what is the difference between doing that and chanting Hare Krishna in the path of yoga, and then as opposed to the Hare Krishna?
Well, like you said, Hare Krishna is a form of yoga. It's called Bhakti Yoga. And there's other forms of yoga called Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, Kriya Yoga, etc., many different forms of yoga. So in general, the yoga path is meant to lead one gradually to higher and higher states of consciousness. And in one sense, the ultimate form of consciousness is Bhakti Yoga. It contains, in a sense, all the other yogas. So if you engage in the form of Bhakti Yoga, you're dancing, and that's a form of Hatha Yoga. The kind of physical sweating and exercise is a form of Hatha Yoga. But there's nothing wrong with just Hatha Yoga. It's just that if one stays on that level and never progresses beyond it to higher and higher levels, then that's not so good. So that's the difference.
No, but Bhakti Yoga can be pursued without being religiously committed. Is that not right?
Did you hear what he said? Did you hear what he said? That Bhakti Yoga can be pursued without the religious?
He said Hatha Yoga.
Hatha Yoga, I mean.
Bhakti Yoga.
Bhakti. He said Bhakti Yoga can be pursued without the religious element. Isn't that what you asked?
Yeah.
So I'm not aware of one doing that. But what I am aware of is that there's a general process in the different yogas of progressing to higher and higher and more purified states of consciousness. As far as I know, that Bhakti Yoga can be practiced without a religious element to it. But as far as I know, that's not proper Bhakti Yoga. Proper Bhakti Yoga, I think there's a religious element in that there's a sense of God. And God is a very unpopular concept in the West. I mean, it's almost like a swear word. You don't use it. Like people call it the G word sometimes because it's very unpopular. So to say Bhakti Yoga without God or without a religious element, that's a very unusual. It can be done, but it's unusual.
I guess it depends how you define religion. For me, religion gives a structure, an institution to go with. Whereas for me, Bhakti Yoga, like I can chant Hare Krishna and I can feel the effect of that, and I can also chant Om Namah Shivaya, and I can feel the effect of that, and I can have, I can do, I mean, I can chant not only Hare Krishna, I can also chant to Devi, to the different
Demigods,
energies and the different
Devakatas.
Yes. So is that not is that not possible without following a structure? I guess that my question isn't very clear.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're getting at. That in a sense we have to define religion.
Yeah.
And in a sense, religion is institutional and very organized. But there's another kind of religion